Now to our next story, the United Kingdom. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Keir Starmer have faced off in their final televised debate, and that ahead of its election. Both parties went head-to-head over issues from health to immigration and ethics, and struggling to be heard above a noisy protest outside. The debate took place in the central city of Nottingham and represented Mr. Sunak's last big opportunity to give his right-wing Conservatives a fighting chance in their 4th of July polls. Mr. Sunak repeatedly urged voters not to surrender to Labour on everything from borders to taxes, while Mr. Starmer stressed that the election was an opportunity for the country to turn the page on 14 years of Conservative government dominated by austerity, Brexit and party infighting. Neither Mr. Starmer nor Mr. Sunak made any reference to the demonstration, which tapered off in the second half of the debate. Joining us for more on this is journalist and broadcaster of Times Radio, Henry Bonsu. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now.
A pleasure to be with you, Abosede, and all the people of Nigeria.
Yes, very well. Now, perhaps one of the most contentious issues at the final televised debate on Wednesday was immigration. There we saw Rishi Sunak accusing Keir Starmer of taking people for fools over Labour's plans to reduce immigration. But also, Mr. Starmer went somewhat personal, accusing Mr. Sunak of being out of touch, one, and too rich to understand the concerns of most common Britons. What do you make of that?
It was extremely interesting, actually, Abosede, because, as you say, this was Rishi Sunak's last attempt, really, to try and claw back from the really terrible position the Conservatives are in. I mean, most people in this country have made up their mind by now. But for those who haven't, the independents, the waivers, this was a chance for Rishi Sunak to ram home the message that the Labour leader is a flip-flopper, that he's soft on immigration, that you can't trust him on tax, he might roll back Brexit. And this was a chance for Keir Starmer to say, well, look who has been in charge over the past 14 years. Look who has failed to stop the boats. Look who has presided over a huge increase in net migration. I mean, the last figures were something like 680,000 more people coming into the UK than leaving. Rishi Sunak retorted that actually I've managed to get numbers down a little bit in the 18 months since I've been Prime Minister. But one of the key moments in the debate about today was when one man called Robert stood up and said, are you two really the best we have to offer as the next Prime Minister of our great United Kingdom? And he got a round of applause.
I was indeed going to get to that point, because the question I would pose to you would be, based on your interaction with people, really, how confident are they in these two men as the best alternatives that the UK has got at this time?
Well, neither of them is a Thatcher or even a David Cameron or a Blair or a Gordon Brown. These four characters had a degree of charisma and a very large dose of brain power. Now, Rishi Sunak has some brain power. Keir Starmer tends to be a little bit on the back foot, both when they meet in the House of Commons and the weekly Prime Minister's questions, and certainly in this head-to-head format. But they come across as managers, managerialist politicians, people who struggle to cut through and connect with the public, and that's why their net positive stroke negative figures are pretty bad. I mean, Rishi Sunak's are far worse than Keir Starmer's. His net negatives are around -50. Keir Starmer's has risen to about +4. But I think, Obosede, what we're facing now is what we call a change election, where the incumbent have been in power, for good and for ill, for 14 years. And people have simply had enough. There was a poll at the weekend, and something like 70% of the people say they don't like the Conservatives as a party and as a brand. And they think, whether it is to go with the Liberal Democrats or with Labour or even Nigel Farage's insurgent Reform UK, they want a change. So whatever Rishi Sunak does, whether he states correctly to a degree that the economy has been stabilised and we don't want to put your taxes up anymore, and Labour will, people are simply not listening to him anymore.
But quite significantly also, during the debate, some demonstrators chanted outside but neither Mrs. Sunak nor Mr. Starmer, made any reference to them. How much of influence do you think the UK's stance on the Israel-Hamas war could have on these candidates' chances?
Well, I don't think that Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives' very strong support for Israel will affect their voters, because their voters would expect Israel to be defended by the UK government, and they would expect Hamas, which has been designated as a terrorist organization by the UK government, to be attacked and to be crushed. But people are concerned about the huge humanitarian toll. And so from the left, particularly Keir Starmer's Labour left, they will pay the price in certain constituencies where there's a high number of Muslim voters who have shown in a recent by-election where they gave George Galloway, an independent former Labour Party member of Parliament, the nod. And he managed to get in over Conservatives, Labour and others. And I suspect we're going to see that in half a dozen constituencies, which will reduce Labour's expected majority. But yeah, this is a situation in this country. There's an awful lot of young people, people from Asian backgrounds, particularly Muslim backgrounds, who are deeply disappointed with the UK government's stance on this. But by and large, Abosede, this is a Conservative with a small C country. And although we have regular marches in London and some of the big cities, it is not the key issue on which people are going to vote. That is the economy, that is the National Health Service, that is immigration, housing and crime.
Well, July 4 is just 7 days away, and we look forward to what the outcome.
Believe me, this campaign is too long. 5 weeks.
You can't wait for July 4th. It's almost here, and people can head to the polls. Henry Bonsu is journalist and broadcaster of Times Radio. Thank you so much for talking to us on World Now.
My pleasure.